Hi everyone, my name is Rosie. I'm a zookeeper in one of Canada's biggest indoor reptile zoos up here in Ontario. So we're a zoo that specializes in reptiles, and actually more than half of the animals we have here are rescued animals. So our lizards, snakes, crocodilians, and turtles come from seized animals. They come from people who have chosen to buy these animals as pets and then later on could no longer care for them, or they were confiscated at the border or by the police or by the federal government. So with me, next to me, is Friday, and Friday is the animal most relevant to the first question I want to answer. So your teacher Adriana has been sending me your questions, and I've read them all, and I put them all in a list, and I will answer them all to the best of my ability, and I will be answering them all in order. So the first question comes from Victoria, who asks, where do Komodo dragons come from? Are they descended from dragons or dinosaurs? So firstly, to clear that up for you, Victoria, is that the Komodo dragon part of their name actually comes from their fair size. Of course, they're the biggest lizards in the world, and when explorers first found Komodo dragons, they were so amazed and intimidated by these big lizards that they thought these must be dragons. And of course, now we know that dragons don't exist. This was from a long time ago when people didn't really understand a lot about animals or biology or natural history. Komodo dragons are not dinosaurs, and they're certainly not dragons. They're simply really, really big lizards. Much like Friday, the Asian water monitor, who is a pretty big lizard himself. He is actually a relative of the Komodo dragon, and just like the Komodo, he has a big, long, forked tongue, and he can grow pretty large himself. This guy here is about 7 years old. The second question comes from Sierra, who asks, what is the most venomous spider in the world, and are there any bird-eating tarantulas? So first of all, Sierra, the most venomous spider in the world right now is considered to be the Brazilian wandering spider, which is actually not a type of tarantula, but it is a true spider from Brazil and surrounding areas with a very potent venom. It is potentially very deadly if you don't seek medical treatment. However, if you go to the hospital, you should be okay. Now, these spiders are the most venomous spiders right now that we know of, but because they're so shy, there are very few people who are bitten. And of the people who are bitten, they often don't know to go get medical attention. On the other hand, a tarantula like the one in my hand here, this is Charlotte, the Chaco golden knee tarantula. She is actually a type of tarantula, of course, and there are no deadly species of tarantula. They actually have pretty mild venom. And these guys, although some of them are called the bird-eating tarantula, do not actually hunt birds at all. There are some species of tarantula that get large enough to eat small animals, like small frogs and lizards, and maybe even a dead or dying bird, but as a rule, they eat things that they overpower, and they eat things smaller than themselves. A tarantula's diet is actually mostly insects and other arthropods, things like smaller spiders maybe. And something like a bird or a mouse or a frog, they're actually a lot stronger than this spider is. And the spider has no ability to hunt those animals because they have very poor vision. They basically just sit around all day and wait for something to come close enough to them. And a bird or even a lizard has too much calcium in them, which this spider does not need, and it could potentially actually harm them if they ate nothing but. So to answer your question, bird-eating tarantulas, they sound very cool, they sound very sensational, it makes a much better movie, a much better horror movie than a spider that just ate boring things like crickets. But actually, that's a misconception. So Eric asks, do Goliath bird-eating tarantulas really eat a whole bird? And again, the answer, like the last one, was no. Even if they did manage to somehow come across a bird, they would not be able to eat the whole thing, potentially. And also, in a lot of the pictures that we see of tarantulas posing while they're eating a bird, sometimes it's just a pigeon that's already dead, and the photographer takes the spider and poses it with that animal. It's incredibly rare to see a spider eat a small animal like a lizard or a bird, and that's why every time it does, it makes the news all around the world. But considering how many millions and millions and millions of spiders there are in the world, it's actually pretty rare when you think about it. It's definitely not an everyday occurrence. They do get big enough. The biggest tarantula in the world actually grows to be about 12 inches across, like a dinner plate, but because they're so large, they're actually much more fragile. So climbing into the trees to hunt is really dangerous to them. If they fall down, they could crack like an egg and they could die. Eric also asks, can you keep an aquatic salamander as a pet safely? and that the salamander feels happy. Well, salamanders are amphibians, and these guys need a lot of humidity and a lot of moisture, and they also need a lot of care. Basically, salamanders, as long as they feel provided for, it is possible to keep one safely, but you have to make sure that it's a species that was humanely bred and ethically bred, and that it's not endangered or even collected from the wild. We should never take animals out of the wild to make pets for our homes. So if they were bred for that purpose, and it's an animal that will live to be an age that you feel like you can care for it forever, so don't take it in for a year and then decide to give it away or abandon it, then potentially, depending on the salamander, some of them can make very good pets. Here in Canada, there's lots of people who keep salamanders, but they have to have a lot of moisture, they have to have a lot of care given to them. They're not usually a good beginner pet for people. And thirdly, how many species of venomous little frogs are there? And to answer that question, we're going to go see some little poison dart frogs right now. Okay, so here we have a little poison dart frog. Whoop. And this is the blue and black poison dart frog. As you can see, they move pretty quickly. So there are over 170 species of poison dart frogs. They come in a variety of colors. And a really cool fact about those guys is that if you are feeding them no non-toxic insects, they actually can't make any of their own toxins. So in the wild, these guys can become very poisonous due to the diet. So these kinds of frogs eat all sorts of toxic arthropods, things like small centipedes or millipedes or ants, and then they accumulate all of the toxins in special glands in their bodies, and then they can secrete them when they're ready. But if you feed them harmless insects, things like small crickets, fruit flies, bean beetles, they're actually completely harmless and non-toxic. Okay, so the next couple of questions, I don't see a name on the slip of paper, so I'm just going to answer them and read out the questions. So the next question says, why do turtles have a carapace? So that's a very good question. The carapace, of course, is the top portion of the shell that protects a turtle or a tortoise, and turtles have carapaces basically to help them survive. It's their protection. So the carapace portion of the tortoise is actually the spine and the ribs of the tortoise. And then the shell underneath this turtle's body, right here, that's called the plastron, and that is actually the sternum of the animal. So the sternum is your breastbone, and you have the same bones inside your body. So in the wild, of course, all animals have to avoid getting eaten by predators, and animals have a variety of different ways to protect themselves. So having a shell is simply the strategy that turtles have figured out how to best avoid getting eaten. The next question from the same student asks, why do I like tarantulas so much? And well, I think I like tarantulas for the same reason that I like reptiles, because they're a very underappreciated, very misunderstood, and often demonized type of animal. Because they're amazing, they're helpful to us, they're very beautiful, but people are very quick to judge them, even though it's for no good reason. So I like to teach people on protecting the environment and to conserve them, and I also like to demystify these animals that people are often very nervous about. So our redfoot's going for a little walk there. There she goes. And the third question is, why do tarantulas have more hair than spiders? So all spiders, including tarantulas, have a lot of hair, and a lot of the hairs help them with sensory things, because most spiders have 8 eyes, some have 6 eyes, but they really don't see very well. So they need all the hairs on their legs to help them sense the world around them. If the hairs vibrate, it alerts the spider that something's going on around them. Maybe there's a predator breathing down on them, maybe there's a breeze and there's a danger of them falling. A lot of tarantulas seem hairier because they're just way bigger and their hairs are a lot longer. Tarantulas from South America, Central and North America, have special hairs on their abdomen. And those hairs help the spider protect themselves because they can actually be rubbed off. And when they're soft, they float up in the air, and if they land on a predator's skin, it can become very itchy and irritated. And if it lands on the predator's eyes or up their nose, they're going to be rubbing their eyes and scratching their faces, and they're going to be very, very distracted, and the spider will have time to get away. So that's some of the uses for the hairs on spiders. The next question is, why are insects so small? And it's not that insects are small, it's that you're too big. So insects, they can't get very large because of the way they're built. If you think about it, all animals in the world, there's larger ones than us and smaller ones than us. We just happen to be the size that we are. Now, insects can't get very big because of the way they breathe. Insects used to be very big back in prehistoric times because there was a lot more oxygen for them in the atmosphere. But now, because of the way our atmosphere is, insects can't get much bigger because they don't have lungs, they breathe through trachea and spiracles, and it's very constraining. So it's restrictive to them that they can't get they can't get too much oxygen, so they just can't get too big. Technically, if you wanted to make an insect get really, really large, like in a lab or something, then all the pressures inside their bodies can actually make them explode. Why do moths fly at night and not during the day? Okay, so these are obviously not moths behind me, but I had to find somewhere to sit. So not all moths fly at night, most of them do, and that's partially to avoid competition with butterflies. So butterflies often, of course, feed from flowers that bloom during the day, whereas moths will feed on night blooming flowers. And there's a very small group of moths that also eat meat as well, and that's pretty cool. It also helps them avoid predators. So instead of having to fear birds like butterflies who fly during the day, moths often have to fear bats. They have a different set of predators, and they also provide food for a different set of animals. How many years have I lived with tarantulas? Well, it's about 9 years now that I've been keeping tarantulas. I have kept over 50 species and probably over 100 individual animals. I have worked personally with over 2,000 spiders, and that's because I used to work very closely with someone here in Canada who breeds them for the pet trade. So by breeding these animals, you remove the need to collect them from the wild. And that's a much more sustainable way to provide them for people who want to appreciate these animals in captivity and who may not be able to go to their natural habitat to see them. And for how many years have I worked in the zoo? I have worked here for 2 years. So 5 of the names of my tarantulas are Mordecai and Griffin and Jabba. And then the rest of all of them, believe it or not, I don't name because they don't know their names and they don't come when I call them. 5 species that I can name for you right now are Grammostola palcarpes, Brachypelma auratum, Heteropoda maculata, Xenesthus amanus, and Monocentropus balfouri. These are their scientific names or Latin names. What is my favorite type of arachnid? Out of all the different kinds of arachnids, and there are so many different types of arachnids, my favorite arachnid has to be the spider. Because spiders are so variable, they live in all sorts of environments, they have all different shapes and sizes and colors and adaptations. It's just the longer I live, the more I learn about them, and there's always something new you can learn about spiders. And these are animals that have been around since before the dinosaurs. They're really one of the most amazing, underappreciated creatures we have. They're so beautiful, and they are so variable. And we're really lucky to be able to observe so many of different kinds of them. And we're very lucky that we're never far from a spider, because no matter where you go in the world, there are probably spiders not that far from you. So lastly, do I like insects? And yes, I do. My love for spiders actually grew from my love for insects, because when I was growing up, I had a lot of interactions with insects, grasshoppers and crickets and katydids and little leaf hoppers. And then as I learned about insects, I started to learn about spiders as well. And then I discovered, the world of spiders. So yes, I do like insects. Where do tarantulas live? Tarantulas, they live on every continent except for Antarctica. And they can live anywhere from way up in the trees, in the foliage, in tubes of silk, or they can live right down on the ground, maybe under a piece of bark, or maybe underground in a burrow that they've dug for themselves. Some tarantulas stay underground all their lives. Some tarantulas live in the trees all their lives, and some tarantulas live down on the ground. There are some types of spiders that can even live underwater. Not tarantulas, but 2 types of spiders, one in Japan and one in Europe, they have actually learned to spin a silk buoy, which is basically like a basket, and that traps the air under the water, and then they have a little house under the water. So spiders are really amazing. And how do spiders procreate? For that question, I decided instead of a live spider, I would use a little model. Okay, so this is a little toy, obviously, that we have. And I'm going to try to set the computer down. Okay, so how spiders procreate is that they have to fertilize each other internally. So if this were a male tarantula, you see that he has his regular 4 pairs of legs, So 1, here we go. There, 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of legs, and then these 2 in the front are false legs, which I'm sure you've learned. These are called pedipalps, right? So pedipalps are false legs. They're not true legs because they're missing one segment, so they're really not legs. But in the male spider, the pedipalps is what he uses to help him transfer his sperm to the female. So when the male is ready to find a mate, he'll walk along, he'll find one, and usually male spiders are much smaller than female spiders, so they have to be careful because often they can end up getting eaten. So when male spiders find a female, they usually do a little tap to signify that they're there. Maybe some types of spider that are more visual, like jumping spiders, can do a dance. So I'm sure you've seen videos of peacock jumping spiders doing a little courtship dance to flirt with the females. And if the females are happy with this dance, then she will mate with him, kind of like how some species of birds impress each other. So the males use their pedipalps, and they carry their sperm in the very tips, in the tarsi. And then the female, if this were now a female tarantula or spider, her basically organ is underneath her abdomen. So the male would have to get to this part of the spider. So what happens is when a male spider and a female spider meet, at least for tarantulas, the males lift the females up in the air, and then he inserts the tips of his pedipalps underneath her abdomen, and that's how he fertilizes her. Other types of spiders do the same thing, but in different positions. So an orb weaver, where a female is hanging in the air from her web, the male has to sort of just get under her, but also in mid-air. And it's very, very precarious. Okay, my next question is, why are reptiles green? So this is a really interesting one because if you ask anyone what color are reptiles, they will say turtles are green, lizards are green, snakes are green. But if you actually look at any random reptile, you're just as likely to see a variety of colors. So here in my hands, I have a yellow rat snake, a red rat snake, and of course also a black rat snake. Where's his face? Oh, there it is. So snakes actually come in a variety of colors, as do all reptiles. You're just as likely to see a black crocodilian, or a brown turtle, or a red snake, or ones with lots of different colored patterns on them. Generally, green snakes or green reptiles are things that live up in the trees, or animals that need to blend into green things. So having a green color helps them camouflage. But if you look at the wide variety of reptiles that exist in the world, they actually have lots of different colors for a lot of different reasons. Usually it's for camouflage, so something like a scarlet king snake that is red and black and white striped and is very, very vibrant, those colors don't seem like they would blend in very well to the brown earth or the green trees, but actually it creates an optical illusion. Those kinds of snakes, when they're moving very, very quickly at dawn and dusk, when they're active, they're actually really hard to keep track of, until all of a sudden all you see is the tail disappearing in the grass. Lots of snakes also have something called counter shading, which this black snake here has. He's got a very dark top and then a lighter bottom, same as this kind of snake that has a lighter bottom and a darker top. And that kind of coloration, helps the snakes because when the light hits them from the top, they're a little bit lighter, and then the bottom of their bodies, their bellies, are often in the shadow. So they can cancel each other out, and they complement each other and help the snakes stay one complete color. So all of these colors, including the green ones, are there to help the snakes camouflage. And if you're ever interested in finding out why or how certain reptiles are green, it's actually a combination of blue pigment it's a combination of yellow pigment and blue refraction. So their scales reflect blue light combined with yellow pigment in their bodies actually gives them a green color. Okay, so Isa says, I love to work with animals when I grow up, but I don't know what or where. Can you help me? So yes, Isa, you've got plenty of time. If you know you like to work with animals, it's helpful to figure out what types of animals you're most interested in. So for example, me, for the longest time, I thought that I would study insects. And for a long time, I did study insects on my own, but then I ended up working with reptiles and I loved it. So a lot of these opportunities come when you find them. So basically, if you want to work with reptiles or mammals or marine animals, it's helpful to start by studying them and look in your local area, look in your community. Start with places like museums or zoos or other sorts of institutions maybe start volunteering at a vet clinic. They could always use help. I'm sure Adriana can help you in that regard. But basically, just start by working with animals, and everything else should come pretty naturally as you network. Okay. Anamar says, how do you recognize your 2,000 tarantulas? Well, I don't have quite 2,000, but I do have a lot, and I can recognize them because most of them look very different from each other. So some tarantulas are blue, some are purple, some are white with black speckles. They can be yellow and orange. They can have tiger stripes and be pink. Tarantulas come in every color there is. There's probably more tarantulas than there are colors that exist. Do my tarantulas have names? And the answer is 3 of them do, but that's about it. And the answer is they technically all have scientific names, but I don't give them human names. Okay. And Marifer asks how venomous is a tarantula? Well, the answer is there are no deadly tarantulas in the world. They all have venom, but the venom is there to help them eat. So the venom is there to help them kill small insects and worms and things like that. So they're not too dangerous to us. Now, South American tarantulas have slightly weaker venom, and there are some tarantulas from places like Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe that have a more painful bite. It wouldn't be fun to be bitten, but you know, most of the painful part would come from just how big their fangs are. It would be like getting 2 really big needle marks in your arm or wherever you're bitten. Interestingly, you actually cannot be allergic to tarantula venom, making their venom slightly safer than something like a bee sting. Why aren't the spinnerets in the front of a spider? The reason being is that while the spider is spinning web, they're often doing something else. So it frees up their mandibles and their chelicera and their pedipalps and other body parts to help them with other roles. For example, when a spider, like a tarantula, catches some food, while they have the food in their fangs and their chelicerae, while they're digesting their food, they're also spinning in a circle and laying down silk. And this is called a feeding mat. They lay the silk in preparation for eating, so that when they're eating on their silk mat, if something comes close to them, they will feel it moving and it would warn them so that they can feel safe when they are eating. If you're trying to spin silk from your front of your face while still holding onto something, while still trying to digest this food from your fangs, then it's just not going to work out. It's very practical to have spinnerets in the back versus the front. Why do chameleons camouflage? Well, that's a misconception about chameleons as well. I'm going to take you to our chameleon now so you can see what colors his naturalies are. So right here we have our panther chameleon on exhibit, and as you can see, he's not doing very much to blend into his surroundings. Naturally, he is a very vibrant crimson red with spots of green and blue all over his body with a distinguishing stripe down the side. Now, chameleons do camouflage with their surroundings, but they don't turn out to change color to match their surroundings. When a chameleon changes color, it's usually for things like showing their mood, trying to impress or intimidate one another, or sometimes it can even be from temperature cues, something from their environment. And lastly, Sabrina asks, how do you distinguish male arthropods from female arthropods? So it's not quite so simple. There are way too many answers to that question. It depends on what specific type of arthropod you're talking about. Sometimes, depending on the arthropod, it could be the color difference, it could be the size of the wings, it could be the size of the mandibles, it could be the size of their pedipalps, it could be the size of their modified antenna, it could be a pheromone that they secrete, it could also be their size. It could be very, very, very minute differences about their reproductive organs that you can only see under a microscope. And for a lot of arthropods, believe it or not, there are some, or actually many, for whom we still don't know how to distinguish males from females. So it depends on what you're asking for, but the answer is there are many different ways. Loads and loads and loads and loads. So that's it, guys. So we're gonna sign off. Here we have Aria behind me. Thank you guys very much for your questions. I hope I was able to answer them all, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your grade 5 science class. Thank you for asking all these questions of me, and I hope you enjoyed the semi-informal tour of Reptilia Zoo up here in Vaughan as well. Bye-bye.